Good evening, Coin Community, and welcome back to our weekly live stream over at Coins.ph. So, welcome to Coin Community Wednesdays. I hope everyone is having a good week so far. And for tonight's discussion, I'm pretty excited to, you know, discuss some more about how we're building that stablecoin future that we've been talking about, in the last few weeks. See the direction crypto goes, right? So, I think what we also want to future for partnerships and the community. So maybe everyone, if you can drop a GM in the chat, or also and make it in real time. So thank you everyone to be joined tonight with our guest, Paulo Caperig from the Kaia Foundations. I'll bring him up on stage. So Paulo, good evening. Welcome back to the show. And how are you doing on this fine Wednesday evening?
Hi. Hey, community. Yeah, I'm back again, and thanks for having me, Jaffa. I am doing fine. Just had my dinner, adobo. It was quite good.
Adobo, yes.
Yeah,
All right. So I
but
guess
hello from Singapore, rather.
thank
Yeah.
you for joining us for tonight's discussion. I think what we wanted to do was to expound, I guess, or expand on the discussion we had last month, right? So I think last month we had more of a discussion on like the origin story of like how Kaya and Coin started
Mm.
partnering and some of the campaigns that we did. And now that maybe people who are new to the community, they've been filled in a bit more if they're tuning in again. I think this for this week's live stream, what we wanted to do was to orient some of the questions and the discussion on your experience as well, since you're the head
Right.
of partnerships with Kaya and you've also been with the community as well. So I think that's the angle that we want to go through
Yeah.
because in Web3 crypto community partnerships connecting people is so important in building a long lasting ecosystem. So I
Mm.
think this is a discussion that maybe people who are more on the crypto side will also appreciate as well.
Yeah.
So maybe let's jump right into it. Um, so we talked about the intro before, but maybe I
Yep.
wanted to get some of your thoughts on where this industry is going and how we're gonna play the game with crypto and building out the industry in the future. So the first question I have for you is this. So, when we're building for that stablecoin future, what do you think matters more today? Strong partnerships or strong tech? And I guess, the answer to this can be very nuanced. It's not black or white. So maybe what's your take on, what is important now in building for that stablecoin dominated future?
Right. Well, I was looking at this question, and actually, from my experience, it actually boils down first to compliance. So before we can talk about partnerships or technology, we have to first recognize what is the regulatory, um, what is the oversight, what is the framework for any given country. So just yesterday, right, there was a Clarity Act in the U.S. which prohibits bans stablecoin yields based on your balances. So that's a very strong that's a very strong interpretation, rather, right? A pretty strong movement from the U.S. In Indonesia, like I said last time, they actually almost consider stablecoins like fiat because of the underlying asset, and because of that, interestingly enough, it doesn't fall under the central bank's jurisdiction. It falls under the OJK, which runs commodities. It treats it like commodities. Dito in the Philippines, right? Or in the Philippines, we have some clarity, right? We have, at the very least, there's some legislation in place. So I would first approach it more from this perspective of, okay, what is the country that I'm targeting? What is the use case I'm targeting? What's allowed to happen? Right. So, for example, for a centralized exchange like yourself, you have virtual assets. You're a virtual asset service provider. You have a VASP license. You may not be able to move funds, use funds to yield products, but you're allowed to hold them essentially, and maybe hopefully gain some yield over there. So before technology, And before partnerships, we have to see if it's compliant first. And when it's compliant, then I'm sure we can discuss it more down the line. That's when we have the partnerships come to play. I want compliance. Do we compliance first? Can we do it? And then technology first. How are we able to do this? How are we able to run stable coins? Custodial, not custodial? Is it backed one to one in terms of reserves in the bank, or is it just pegged one to one? There's a difference, right? Because you can peg the value one to one to the peso or to the dollar, but you may not be backing it. It may be another asset. So that's another way of looking at it. Whether it's is that even compliant or not? Once we have the technology, then you figure out what is the use case, right? Is this more for payments? Is it for? I think you discussed this with Christine and Iman last week, right? Whether what's the utility? Is it more on remittances, right, or B2B transactions? Once we have that use case, then we can scour the kind of partnerships that we want. So I would look at it in that framework. Compliance is it compliant? What's the law? What can we do? How can we do it with the technology layer? And who do we do it? And what is the use case? And that's where the partnerships come to play.
Gotcha. So I think it's a great to the discussion is so people see is the tech good, the fees, the finality, is the community strong. But I think when you're working at it from like a distribution perspective, and when you're building that ecosystem out, compliance is so important because um being able to understand the rules, of course, and working hand in hand also with like legislators and the lawmakers, I think is good for sustainability because without that, you're treading on very, I guess, brittle ground, and you want to be sure that the activities that you're conducting are in line, with the law that I guess surrounds like digital assets and virtual assets. So yeah, I think what we're seeing a lot more of, and I think it's good that you mentioned, yesterday, that Clarity Act.
Yeah.
Also, that's, I guess, emerging news. So it's very fresh. So we'll see
Yeah.
more on how that will trickle down to
Yeah.
other, I guess, countries in terms of how they proceed with
Mm.
lawmaking with regards to these things. So thanks for that. I like that answer, Paulo. So I guess it's the topic we're doing tonight is more on like partnerships, community. So you as
Yeah.
the head of
Let's
partnerships
do it.
for Kaia, so the next question is, what role do partnerships play, in turning stable coins from liquidity, on chain and in these people's wallets into something that people can use in the real world and in their like day-to-day lives?
Yeah. When I thought about this, so from a partnership, so for anyone that wants to do business development or partnerships, um, one one milestone usually is the integration itself. But before the integration itself is sought, or before we look for it, we have to always define what is the use case. Because usually there's some money involved, right? Whenever there's an integration, there's development cost, there's marketing cost. So before we go there, we have to determine what is the use case. So I guess for partnerships perspective, we have to define the use case first. So for example, in the Philippines, I've spoken to a few. For example, in NCR and in Baguio, we have people were asking me about a use case because there's a lot of artists in Baguio. They're artisans, right? They have some crafts, and they want to have revenue, and they want to be able to gain revenue from secondary trading of their art, like like silver jewelry. There's a lot of it going on in Baguio, but they don't have the ability to do that. No, that's demand. So because of that demand, then the next step then is to have a partner that can function like or can develop something like OpenSea, right? Where you automate smart contracts so that the artists can benefit when their goods are resold into the market. So they always have ongoing revenue. So royalties like this and fair payouts like this, governed not by a human but by a program in smart contracts, is an actual use case. So our job, my job as partnerships, as a guy leading partnerships, is to find these use cases, and then find not just find the use cases, be out there and listen what the need is, and then bridge that gap by finding the partners. And then, of course, along the road, everybody ideally gain some revenue, right? So in the Philippines, for example, further down is we have a lot of it's somehow becoming the hub for uh, VAs, right? Virtual assistants and gig workers and creatives. You guys are championing that a lot, right? I heard that even in your last week, and and some of them may want to avoid the fees from these platforms like Upwork or freelance or whatnot. And some employers also prefer to pay in stablecoins, right? So this is demand. So because this is demand, then we then have to find the partners that could mend this demand or meet this demand. So that will usually come in the form of which issuer, which on and off ramp provider, on ramp on one side from the employer, for example, and off ramp which is you, right? Because you guys do the last mile payout, you do the conversion from overseas of funds or stable coins to the last mile payout in PH to e-wallets and bank accounts. So these kinds is something that I will facilitate. I think that's something that we'll have in discussions about, especially when we do remittances. But yeah, so partnerships, we we scour the land and we listen to what the demand is, what are the pain points for businesses, and then we find the solutions to them, whatever the case may be. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I think when you mentioned that, like, you have you look for partners, and like I mean, you mentioned Baguio, right? And you have these kind of, maybe they're also like niche communities in a sense, who are trying to adopt this technology. So ears to the ground, really important, so that you can find a use case for um, these communities, these businesses that want to
Yeah.
use the blockchain technology, to bring their businesses, like, on chain, or to use the tech that blockchain provides to reach a more global audience or something. So I guess the next question I have, in line with that, so you
Mm.
mentioned a bit more about Baguio and CR, but I think one thing that also I'd like to give the community some insight to is, so Kaya has distribution not just in the Philippines, right, but also in different Asian markets. So you guys are in Southeast Asia, in Northeast Asia. So maybe you can give some insight and some BD knowledge, wisdom to how do you approach building those partnerships differently across different Asia markets. Let me just edit that real quick.
Yeah, actually, that is it's very nuanced because each country is different and has different needs, right? So for those that don't know, Kaya is very strong in Asia because we have distribution for South Korea because our parent company was Kakao. So we have Kakao Talk and whatnot that started this chain, and then we also do the distribution for Line Messenger, which is like the messenger go-to messenger for Japan, Taiwan, and Thailand. So how do we approach partnerships in Asia? We mm, okay. Let's go with, for example, Japan.
Yeah.
Japan's pain point is the interest rate is negative for what they get in the banks, right? By design, this is by design to attract business from overseas. Japan is actually plays a very big role in the whole world just for that, right? And because of Japanese bonds and how low it is, and how easy it is to get loans, and because of that. But the negative side of that, because of that design that they have in JPY, um, everyday users find it difficult to. It's an uphill battle, to gain to make the most out of what you have in your JPY fiat. So here is where crypto comes to play because in 1 or 2 months we'll have JPYC, the regulated stablecoin from Japan, coming into play. We're crafting use cases now from a partnerships level on finding lending protocols, finding staking protocols. We have our own staking protocol, for example. Maybe users can deposit or use their JPYC as collateral in order to get USD or USDT and whatnot, right? And then they can participate in the greater DeFi ecosystem. And so this is one way. It's a very real problem in Japan, and it's a very real solution that we have. In Thailand, for example, they call their stablecoins. They prefer to use the term programmable payments, not stablecoins. That's coming from the Bank of Thailand. Why? Because they're not that mature yet in terms of crypto, but there's a lot of demand. So because they want to be very cautious, each use case has to be programmed or defined. So we're working out a way where Thai baht stablecoins can be used in our games to purchase just for games. You're not allowed to swap it to USDT, for example. You're not allowed to deploy it in DeFi. You're not allowed to pay merchants first. Um, each or maybe you can, but that's another use case. So there has to be one use case strictly for gaming. This is what you do it with. And there's another layer of Thai baht programmable payment slash stablecoins, specifically for paying merchants. But for this, we work with a licensed payment service provider, for example, in Thailand. So nuances like this is something that we look for. We have to see first. Again, I go back earlier to whether it's compliant or not. Is it compliant? It's just how their central bank operates. So the FSA Japan, and for example, MAS Monetary Authority of Singapore, and then there's in Thailand, it's the Bank of Thailand. They have different frameworks, and then from then we then find what is the need. So in the Philippines and for example in Japan, in South Korea, there's a big need for remittances because as it turns out, a lot of people fly to Korea to work, right? Especially for technical or other kinds of labor. And they want to send money back home, but it's difficult for them to do so. For example, right, for whatever reason, whether it's because they're unbanked or whether they just want to they don't understand how it works. So sometimes this is where crypto comes into play, and then we work with not crypto banks, but actual banks in Korea to have these proof of concepts. We actually found a way to have a feature, a remittance feature in one of the banks, and then under the hood was actually minting a stable coin asset of sorts, but it stays within the bank. And on the other end of the country, is in a different country, is a licensed wallet or a bank, for example, that allows for the last mile payout to the user. This is usually very difficult to do, but because there's demand, for example, from overseas workers flying to Korea, from Southeast Asia, for example, like Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, flying in, we are serving that demand. But we as a business team, me a part of the partnership, I have to orchestrate, I have to architect how that actually works. How does compliant flow work from fiat to crypto? From crypto to one financial institution to another financial institution, how does the flow work? How does the compliant flow work? What is the conversion rate, for example? Is it even favorable? Is it even worthwhile doing? And from that, which provider then do we use to pay the user? If they use e-wallets, then we have to use this for this particular country. And if not, so then the partnerships team becomes somebody that pieces the puzzles together when we identify the demand on both ends. And hopefully, of course, in the middle, then everybody makes some revenue. And it has to be something worthwhile doing. It has to be painful enough for people to change their habits on as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight. I think I love the examples that you give for the context for, like, as you mentioned, Japan, then Thailand, and then a bit of Korea. So it's really, you need to get that context for that compliance, and how can that translate into what is implemented down the line. So I think this is going to be, very exciting to see, because each country has, their own legislation, their own ways of approaching these things. So it's an evolving thing. And I think what really struck to me was really, like, with Thailand, because of how it's very directed. I think, as you mentioned, with programmable
Yeah,
payments,
yeah,
you have to be intentional with
yeah,
what you're going to be using the money for. So
correct.
yeah, so I think that's very interesting to see, like, how the philosophies of
Yeah,
legislators will affect the compliance layer, and then eventually the partnerships and how it's implemented. So thank you, Paolo. I love that answer.
yeah.
The next question I have, oh, this is good. Maybe this one. No? So, what makes a partner, high impact in driving actual stablecoin adoption? So, this isn't
I
to, like, differentiate or to, like, highlight certain people, right? But I'm sure that definitely there are some partnerships that will really move the needle in terms of, like, this is the way for people to gain more access, or for people to use stable coins more. So maybe you can touch on this a bit briefly, and what really makes a partnership very impactful, especially given that you mentioned a lot of nuance and that compliance and the context that these different countries have with how stable coins and how it's implemented, for the end user to eventually use.
For sure. What is a high impact? What makes a partner high impact in driving actual stablecoin adoption? Uh, well, a lot of partnerships are logo swaps. You know, like hi, I partner with this, and then you write a post about it, and then that's it. That doesn't work anymore because of the bear market. That doesn't move behavior anymore compared to before. That doesn't convert. So actually now is I guess there's three things that's preparing for this. The first one is actual revenue potential. That's number one. You'll be surprised. I'm not sure if it's a surprise or not, but a lot of crypto companies are actually not profitable, right? They may not even make revenue, right? So the primary and partnerships should it's not a vibe role, you know, it's actually a revenue driven role, right? So the first high impact, the primary driver is revenue potential, not theoretical, but it's actually a real one, right? So is there a way, is there a path to revenue from a particular partnership? Does it open a need from a whatever demand that, like I mentioned, with instrumentances and whatnot? You know, what's the economics? How does it work? I think that's number one. I've already touched on that. Number two would be on um, a distribution, real distribution, and the ability to have user acquisition cheaply. Yeah, cost per acquisition should be fairly low. If For your audience maybe, or for the builders that you want to dive into sales or business development or partnerships, usually the product, people would think that the product is the main cost, but actually no. The product is just the start of the cost that you're doing once you build a product. After that is actually the more expensive chunk, which is marketing and user acquisition. It's very expensive to acquire users, right? The graveyard is vast for startups. You know, you only yeah, we have a survivorship bias, right? I'm sure as you've heard about. Survivorship bias means that we're only aware of the companies that we have access to, but we actually don't know the massive graveyard of startups and Web3. You know, there's a lot of chains that are dead, a lot of exchanges that are dead, a lot of wallets that are dead. Um, they may be dead because they did not have the ability to acquire users in a cheap way, or they couldn't find the partners to help them with distribution. So for us, we partnered with Line Messenger, right? Because it's a message that people use every day. So as long as we not convert, but we embed parts of it, like a neobank or a swap functionality or a trading functionality or a crypto game functionality inside to give people a taste of crypto, I think it's a win for us because it reduces the cost for acquiring users because users already possess the device, already use it in their daily lives. Right? So that's the second factor for high impact partnerships. I guess the third one will be the ability for them to build a flywheel that delights their users and retains their users, right? So we know the flywheel of what it means to delight our users. The delight, like I mentioned, goes back to demand. You know, the best partners don't just give users, they understand users deep enough, and then they design retention models. They design ways to make them keep coming back, to give them value. So for us, we have a yield product that gives about 4 to 5% right now in terms of yield. So that is delight that we give to our users, and we retain them maybe by providing incentives, you know, like to increase a little bit of yield every now and then, right? Or yeah, we start with that because that's the most high impact partner, and the most high impact partnership that we have with a vault and a vault curator. So we source for that vault. It's reputable. They reduce the risks. This is a good partner. We will use this to give delight to our users, and then once our users are delighted with the value, then there's revenue potential, and ideally, then we work our way to finding another partner for distribution. Yeah. So I would go, I guess it's really just two things. One in terms of value for the user, and value for us in terms of revenue. And then the second one is on distribution. Yeah. Having the ability to reach users.
Thanks, Paulo. Yeah, I love that framework. So the revenue is revenue generating, is the cost to acquire the users low, and as you mentioned, flywheel. So as a community lead, always finding ways to delight. I like the word that you use, delight. Make sure that it's appealing and people enjoy using your product as well. So thanks for that framework. um I hope people take that in, because I think that's a very concise way to really like answer such a high density question like this. So what makes a partnership very high impact? So thanks, Paulo. Great
Yeah.
insight. Um, so I guess on the flip side, so the next question I have for you is this one. So what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced, in aligning those incentives between the partners that you have for distribution, for your end users, and the ecosystem where they all kind of interact. So I guess what are some of those things that you've I guess probably encountered? So this can be from like a compliance standpoint as well, since we're very big on that, and maybe that's
Yeah.
one of the big things that I would guess or assume can help, or can hinder certain incentives or alignments between like your users and your partners. But I could be wrong, so maybe you should shed some light on that as well.
Yeah, no, it's a very multifaceted question. Incentives. So I guess on a partner level, incentives. So for those that don't know, you have to think of us as a layer one, like a network, right? It's a base for people to build on, for people, for a framework, a language for people to communicate or to have their apps on. So because it's like a base, think of it like a country. So we have to attract different people to move to our country to populate it so that there's activity in the chain and people transacting in the chain, and not just that, but also having these crypto experiences within there, right? And that helps us to get some revenue, right? The biggest challenge for that is then it becomes a race to the bottom, or rather a race to the top, in terms of incentives for partners, right? It doesn't help that some very highly venture-backed ecosystems or chains are just flowing with money and grants. They're just like 1 million for you, 1 million for you, to builders, right? So that's incentive. So usually incentives for partners, it could be number one, financial, because partners, many of them may not have their products fully out yet, so they need money, because they bootstrap or fund it themselves, or they maybe only have some venture capital or angels, very little funds. So they need to keep money flowing in order to keep building their product. So they need money. So they generally ask for money from foundations and from chains to be able to build on the chain. That's number one that they want, is cash. Number two that they want, that I already mentioned, is distribution, or having a full ecosystem, like you mentioned in your question. So what partners want is that when they go to a chain, everything is there. It's a one stop shop. If I go to Kaia, for example, why they choose Kaia is Kaia already has distribution in Asia. Kaia has multiple local stablecoins in a single chain. Kaia is EVM, it's Ethereum based language, so it's easy to communicate. It's easy for us to port our code from Polygon and from Ethereum into the Kaia application. So I don't have to pay my developers to learn or to change that language, right? So one is financial, the other one is maturity of the ecosystem. So that me as a builder, when I come in, I can connect with people that already have users. I have the infrastructure, I have the custody, I have the compliance layer, yada yada, right? So that's the thing for partners. For users, I don't think there's getting away with it. It's always down to incentives and value. But I guess how we can stand out is on the UX, on the in the user experience, right? So sometimes it's very painful to use other DeFi protocols because every move you make, maybe the gas is not subsidized.
Yeah.
Maybe you have to create a new wallet. Maybe you have to remember a different seed phrase, right? Maybe you have to use a particular bridge. So the UX is very bad. So while it could be delightful in terms of value, but the UX fails to deliver, right? So this is not incentivizing. This is not something that incentivizes me. This is not something that will change my behavior. We have to understand that as startups, we are in the business of change management. So we want to understand consumer behavior and be able to influence and convert that to a different kind of action. And that's where conversion happens, right? So that could be done with incentives. That could be done with we delight them with the incentives and the value, and we delight them with user experience. I think those two things. I mean, there's the branding element as well, but that's a little bit more subjective. This is how you feel inside. But that's for another story. That's more of a marketing spin, which is also valid. But From a product perspective, those would be the core for me. How valuable is it, and how good of a user experience is it?
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I mean, you laid it out pretty well, right? So, I think definitely, as you mentioned, the user experience for your end users is so important because how it makes them feel when they're using the product, when they're sending money, using their money, can really sometimes make or break, like the experience that they have with like a chain or a service. So I think, as you mentioned, like, is gas subsidized? Because I think that's been a pain point ever since, right? Like, um,
Yeah,
the costs of using a service or a product gets to people. So working on that over time is something that we always want to make faster and cheaper. So for the next set question, because I'm getting a lot of community questions and I'm loving them, so I'd want to touch
by the
on
way.
those, right? Right.
Yeah.
So maybe let's just move a bit forward with the set questions that I had, and we have a lot of people
So,
also in the audience as well. So thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying the discussion. So from one community lead or former community lead, for Kaia, to another, what does a healthy stablecoin ecosystem look like from a community perspective? I would guess that it's people are, of course, using your product. They're giving feedback, creating content, and talking about the pros, the cons, so that you can work together to, make your offering a lot better. But for you, maybe when we're building for that stablecoin future, what does that healthy ecosystem look like, from the community perspective?
what does a healthy stablecoin ecosystem look like? One, I can make money from it. Number two, that's number one. So that's where the utility happens, and whether it's convenient or not. Make money in ways of not just yield, but is it cheaper than using other stablecoins, for example, right? So I'm sure you know this stuff. Like for coins, maybe you're maybe one of the lowest in terms of fees, right? For trading, right? So people would use coins because that's why it's valuable to me. For us in USDT, our gas is 15 times cheaper than Polygon, for example, and while using the same code, you know. So as an ecosystem, this is good for me, right? So I think that's the one from a builder perspective. From a user's perspective, well, there's a few metrics, right? There's TVL, total value locked. And there's I'm sorry, the kids are really
It's
loud.
fine.
So there's TVL. There's things that I can play with, right? So things that I can play with. That's the maturity of the system. For example, am I able to use my stablecoin as a collateral in order for me to are there real world assets here that I can deposit so that I can get more stablecoins? Then I can use that to even generate to get more loans in real world assets. So this is what happens with this is a process called looping, for example, in crypto, right? Or we have liquid staking, which is also present in Kaia. Users want to be able to see, oh, can I use this to stake and then restake for more rewards? Right? Can I use? Is this composable in terms of can I adjust the risk that I take to 2x or 3x or whatever kind of leverage? So users want the ability, the mobility to play with different instruments and have gains from it. So these are just a substantiated way of looking at utility. That's number one, and number two is it has to be trustworthy. Yeah, trustworthy as in is it with an institution that I trust? Do other people talk about this? Is there a good branding? As much as superficial as that sounds, it really builds the trust. Is it compliant? Is it something that the regulators are okay with? Do they work with the government, for example, or banks? So is it number one? Is it something that I can trust? And number two, is it something that I can play around with and have fun and have that delight and that value? So that would make it healthy from a user's perspective. And of course, I think I alluded to it. It's also down. It boils down to my experience. Is it a smooth experience? Is it choppy? Do I get scared when I use it? Is it unfamiliar, or maybe is it too familiar? This is the problem we had with one of our products, our new bank products in Japan. It looked too similar to like a bank without a banking license, for example. Then
Yeah.
so sometimes if the UX is too good or it's too familiar, then we also have some problems. So it's that balance that we have to take
Right.
with users.
Thank you. I love that. Okay, so just touch on quickly the last two because I'd also like your insight for this one. So maybe this one. Where do you see the biggest gap today since you're the head of partnerships? Is it the distribution, the use cases of stablecoins of crypto, or active users? Are people just leaving the space altogether?
What do you see the biggest gap today? Distribution, use cases, or active users? Active users will be the same with distribution. Okay, so number one, use case. We have use case, right? We have a lot of use cases.
Yep.
It's all samey. Yeah, use cases. So for example, oh, I want to DeFi. Okay, there's Aave, Curve, Morpho, Gauntlet. There's looping. Oh, there's Pendle, and yada yada yada. So there are use cases, right? So it becomes so if use cases are available, then what's next? Distribution and user acquisition, I think, is still the biggest problem. We as a builder space are competing with the million or so, a few million people that are in crypto, right? So the bigger fish, we have to look at the bigger pond, actually, or the ocean of people that are yet to be converted to crypto. We did this a little bit slowly, I guess. And in the US, there's Coinbase, which is everywhere, and there's different ads everywhere. When the Telegram boom happened about 2 years ago, that was the airdrop mayhem, right? So because of airdrop and token generation events, TGE events, it was very popular. So that helped the industry acquire users, right? So now we are moving into a space where okay, it's no longer NFTs to acquire, no longer NFTs as the casino, no longer TGEs as the casino. So I think now maybe we're doing prediction markets as one of the casinos. That's number one, to acquire users. Number two, this could be maybe we're looking at a trend of not just prediction markets but perps, perpetual dexes, right? Like lighter, aster, and whatnot. So we generally come up with different tools to acquire users and delight them. And these are and finally, I think the last leg. So first is the trends to acquire users. The second is what we're doing. What we're doing is we're trying to work with Web2 players. Yeah. So we have Line, we have banks, we have compliant centralized exchanges that sow the line between Web3 and Web2, right? So you guys are one of the best players out there because you do both. Especially for coins, you have the license for both the VSP, that's for digital assets, and you have like the money license as well for fiat. So these kinds of partners would work best that can have both of those ends, especially with user acquisition as well. Mm.
Thank you, Paulo. And then yeah, I think let's just move on to the community questions. There's a lot of good questions, but before that, I just like to quickly plug since there are over 200 people, now watching. So of course, so right now we're running a campaign with Kaia. So let me
Go!
just share the poster for that. So yeah, we do have a March Deposit Madness. So get a share of 250,000 pesos in rewards running until April 8th. So all you have to do is to receive a minimum of 150 USDT via the Kaya network on your coins account, and have this be sent from someone else, and you'll be getting a raffle entry to our March Deposit Madness raffle. For every 150 USDT you receive, up to 3 raffle entries per total user, and the eligible winners will win $50. So yeah, hope you guys can join. We saw really great results also from this previously, so hope you guys can partake and learn more about Kai as well. And I know you guys are also working on like contribution rewards in your community, so go check out the Kai ecosystem, guys. They're awesome. So that's it for my plug. Let's get back to the discussion. So um, thank you for that. Let's go.
250K.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Sheesh.
Sheesh. Okay.
Sheesh.
Um, so I guess let's take some comments. There's a lot of comments from Facebook, right? And the
Yeah.
first one I have is this one. So touch back a bit on our discussion. So from Chris Edgren, they asked, so going back, so what makes Kaya's approach to
Mm.
stablecoins different from what's already in the market today?
Good question. We are actually doubling down on Asia-based stablecoins. So we're hoping to onboard PHP soon, of course. But so we already have a few Indonesian rupiah stablecoins. Japan, a Japanese yen stablecoin is coming on board to Kaya. We're working with a few ankles for Thai baht stablecoin, Singapore stablecoin, Malaysia, Hong Kong, China, and a few others, right? So we are unique in a way that in approaching stablecoins. Of course, we have USD and Tether as a very close partner, right? We're one of the few native USDT deployments that they have, and they trust us for the distribution in Asia angle. But we also have local stablecoins to come into the picture. Why is this important? It is especially important because Asia is a very different beast compared to the rest of the world, right? US, huge landmass, single currency. In the EU, huge landmass, a few different currencies, right? But it's not as many as Asia. We have PHP, we have JPY, we have Korean won, we have Indonesian rupiah, we have Indian rupee. Everything is very fragmented, and each country maybe wants to be a little bit less dependent on the USD, right? So there's a movement of de-dollarization and lesser dependency on the US markets, and they of course want to have their own sovereign governments, want to have their own legal tenders, right? Or ways of participating in the financial market. So this is where local stablecoins shine and come into play, because only the local participants know how the banks work well, right? Only they know how their users behave the best. And they know how to structure these local stablecoins. For example, in Japan, we need more financial instruments like Japanese bonds. So we're structuring maybe JPY based thing that participates in bonds. In Philippines, it could be that there's a strong need for remittances. So PHP C is partnering um, with Codex, for example, and a few others, right, for remittances, right? So I think that's what separates us. With one chain, you can get multiple local stable coins, and you can get distributed in every single centralized exchange in Asia, right? Not many people can to do that. Like we're in here in the Philippines, for example, in Coins, in Thailand, we're with BitCup, for example, in China, everywhere else, right? There's a lot of exchanges that are based in China, Indonesia as well. So every single we execute on a very local, hyper local level, partnering with local stable coin issuers that understand their users the best. Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. I think you're lost, you, bruh. Are you back? Yes.
I can hear you. Hold on, hold on.
Okay, you're back. You're back. Okay, okay.
I'm good. All right. So don't worry
Yeah.
about me. I think what's important is I want to show these community questions for you. So the next question I have is this one. So I like this since you've touched on community and partnerships of Kaya. So from Henry C with the Google PFP, how does Kaya approach community engagement and outreach, particularly in Southeast Asia or non-crypto audiences? So maybe you can touch on what you talked about earlier with your experience in like Baguio or bringing certain businesses like on chain through smart contracts and stuff. So maybe just maybe an example of that, or maybe if you have another example from other countries that you've also serviced, how does that community and partnership come together in areas that you also service outside of the Philippines?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In South Korea, there's a big craze for foreign stocks, AI stocks,
Mm.
right? So we help them by working with partners that either do this form of tokenization for US or AI stocks. We help them by helping to build a Korean won stablecoin that is compliant, right? Compliant with the banks. So we help them with this, and we understand that. I'm not sure if you know this, but in South Korea, the trading volume for crypto is bigger than the trading volume for stocks. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Insane. So what does that mean? That means it's a very
Big mark.
yeah, it's a very high it's a very open-minded
Mm,
open-minded people, right? So I would say that more daring, more
right.
bold community. So what that means is they're hungry for more perps, for example, right? Or ways of going around exotic stocks. So they're very big on meme coins and whatnot, and betting big on particular whatever tokens and projects there are. So that's for South Korea, for example. In Indonesia, the rupiah is performing, or the rupiah is performing terribly, right? So their main fiat, because it's so volatile, um, people want to hedge their bets and save in USD. So we serve them by giving a narrative framework of, hey, you can convert your Indonesian rupiah in license exchanges and save in and hedge your money in USD. So this is one of the countries where USD is actually stronger and higher in demand compared to a local stablecoin. So we help the retail to save in USD. We help companies and businesses to transact in USD, being helping them be in the middle, right? So that they can transact with the global market because the Indonesian rupiah is a little weak. So these are a few examples that we do. But what we always do is we have to understand how locals think, what is the what is the ideal customer profile in in these countries, what are their needs. We delight them by finding the partners that serve them in the best rates possible, and using our tech that provides ideally the best tech possible, right?
Awesome. Thank you, Henry, for that
Thanks, Andy.
question. Yeah. Next question. I like, if you also see questions from, I think you have access to the comments, no? If you
I
want to
do.
pick one out, just let me know, read out their name, and I'll flash it on screen. But in the meantime, I like this one. So going back to, that beginner segment, this one. So from Twitter, from X, so Ilavepet, they ask, for someone completely new to crypto, why should they even care about stable coins today?
Mm. Yeah. So again, it boils down to where are you from, right? So if you're from Singapore, like where I'm here, right? Our banking system is extremely efficient. I can send money to my friends quickly, right? So I may not need stablecoins, right? So I may not need stablecoins for transactions or peer-to-peer transactions, but I may need stablecoins in order to participate in financial instruments that are usually not available to me. So what does that mean? So usually, for example, there are some instruments that are gated. For example, by maybe it's only given to accredited investors. So what are accredited investors? Accredited investors need to have to prove that they have assets worth like $2 million or so. I think 1 to 3 million around there. Not many people have that, right? But sometimes the only their financial instruments that give you like more yield that is only available for this particular class. But with stablecoins, maybe I can participate in DeFi to give me equivalent yields, provided it's less centralized, equivalent yields by using stablecoins, right? So I would care about it because I can get something valuable to me that I can't get otherwise with fiat. I can't this I as a for example me as someone from Japan, I can't get I can get interest on my JPY. I can use it to lend. I can use it as a collateral in order for me to participate in different kinds of DeFi activities. But with stable coins, I can do that, right? Because it's on chain. Yeah, there's less fees in between. That's the third one. When using stable coins, because you know how money works, is they're usually an issuing bank and an acquiring bank, so different kinds of banks. Every time they communicate, and there's usually something in the someone in the middle, that every time that money moves from person A to person B, these banks all take a cut. By the end of your transaction, usually there's a reduced like 30% of your whole transaction. This is why some stores don't accept Visa and MasterCard, right? Because Visa and MasterCard takes a cut. So they would rather take cash or Gcash and whatnot, right? So, but stablecoins solve this because maybe the fiat underlying can be present. You can pay with it directly. It gives value to the merchants because now they can save the 3% as their revenue, and it gives value for the user as well because they can participate in different instruments that are usually not available to them.
Right. Thank you, Elave, for that question. Probably last two questions since we're coming up on time. I like this one also. So we're talking about the stablecoin future, right? So from Twitter also, Sleppy Delta, they ask, how can stablecoins help people in provinces or
Uh,
underserved communities? So, one of the ethos of crypto is equality of access, right? So that people can have their hands on this technology. So maybe what have you seen also Maybe you are also familiar with how this is helping people in far-flung areas in the Philippines. But what about people who don't have as much access in other countries, like in Asia, maybe? So maybe how
Yeah.
have you also seen stablecoins serve those communities?
I would I would go back to the similar example I had with Indonesia, for example. In the provinces, I grew up in the provinces, uh, in Mindanao. You know, you maybe all you know is work. The money game for you is to have work, and the best form of investment you have is from that long lost cousin or classmate of yours that is selling insurances. And that's your version of financial literacy. But you're not privy, you don't have access to US markets. You don't have access to USD savings and appreciation, hedging your savings there. You're not even aware that that's possible for you, because all you know is this particular little world that you have. But with crypto, because you participate in a global market, we participate in a decentralized, meaning there's less intervention from corporate, structures. Because of that, I can participate more freely. Maybe I just go through a centralized exchange like Coins, do my KYC. After that, then I can participate without needing, necessarily a barrage of financial advisors, without needing to pay for a barrage of fees. Or I can just leave my money there. I can buy USD stablecoin, and if the peso goes down and USD is like 60, 70 pesos worth, then I win, right? But I don't have to. My money doesn't have to degrade and degenerate, and be eaten by inflation. So these are just the start of what we can do, but there's a whole world, a big, huge, financial industry out there for us.
Thank you, Slappy Delta. Maybe last question. I like this one. I chose it so that we can wrap up the discussion. One of
Yeah.
our frequent viewers, also Ari Greyrat, so on Facebook, they ask, maybe take your time with this one. So, in one sentence, how would you describe the stablecoin future to someone who has never used crypto before? Pang Miss
Wow.
Universe.
Pang Miss Universe. um, I try to avoid answers that lead to stablecoins taking over the world. I don't think that's realistic, and that's not true as well. Rather, the stablecoin future is something that complements or enhances the gaps that we have with fiat. So like I mentioned to you, maybe for some countries, where your primary mode of transacting is cash, maybe cash can be king for that. But maybe if they want to move money around, maybe they don't want to pay on the fees too much. So then they can use stablecoins to augment or to improve their experience that they don't have with fiat, right? So I think that's the broader use case, is to bridge the gap between what's missing in fiat. So I mentioned the economic opportunities. That's number one. Number two, a different kind of value that I get from moving stablecoins around to communicate with a global layer and different, and number three is, in case the stablecoin future is in case I don't want oversight over my transactions. Maybe I buy some, fizzy magazines, or whatnot, or some iffy subscriptions that I don't want to be traced. Right, so that stays with me, right? So if I subscribe to manhwa or manga or whatnot, I don't want to. Maybe I don't want anyone to know about that. And luckily, what if this provider provides the option for stablecoin payments? Then I can keep this to myself, right? So there's privacy. That's the privacy layer. That's something usually not available in a non-stable coin future. It could be done with fiat, sure, but if done with stablecoins, it could augment or better delight me, in this regard. Yeah. So it goes. So the Miss Universe answer is, it goes hand in hand.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the way.
Thank you. I love that. It's never meant to like replace or totally, radicalize, revolutionize. They go hand in hand. They complement one another.
Yeah.
So Ari, thank you for that question. Nice to see you again also on the stream. And Paulo, thank you so much again for your time to join us for Community Wednesday. It's been an absolute blast to
Absolute
talk more about
blast.
this stablecoin future. And I
Yeah.
guess, I'll just plug it one last time for everyone who's tuning in. So we
Too
have
free to pay.
255 viewers.
Woo!
Hopefully you guys can also join us for the March Deposit Madness campaign that we're running with Coins until April 8th. So after the Holy Week. So if you guys deposit Sorry, let me just hide this question real quick. Um, Deposit onto coins via the Kaia network 150 USD worth. You'll be entered into a raffle, up to 3 raffle entries where eligible winners will win 50 USDT straight to their coins wallet. So I hope you guys can join and check this out. This is running all the way until April, so you guys have a lot of time to test out also the Kaia network and also to test out receiving via coins. So thank you very much, Paulo, also for joining us for
Thank you, John.
tonight's discussion. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for everyone who submitted a question. We'll be having another AMA very soon, so hope you guys can tune in again. And yes, we'll definitely have more high level discussions like this. I appreciate the BD and partnership insights that you've given to the community tonight,
Sure.
Paulo. It's been very insightful and very fun. I'm your community manager for Coins.ph. I'm Jaffa or JC, as you guys might know me. Paulo, the head of partnerships for Kaia. It's been a pleasure. And we'll catch you all again on the next Community Wednesdays live stream. Hope you have a great rest of your evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.